Today we're on page 45 in our notebook, so make sure that you pause this video to set up your notebook so that it looks just like this. This is your warm-up for today. It says determine what the rate of change is from the equation below. And so you remember that our equation is in the form of y is equal to mx plus b. And so what you need to determine is what does that m mean and what does that b mean, and you want to find the rate of change. Your learning goal today says, today I'm successful if I can use graphs, equations, tables, and written representations for linear relationships. And linear just means line, a straight line. Your language goal is create a word problem from an equation, table, and a graph. So we're going to be doing a little bit of both today. This is your first example. It says set A, so make sure that you pull out this paper. It gives you a graph, and you have to create a table, an equation, fill in those blanks for your situation, and then also create your ordered pairs. So the very first thing you need to do is find those points on your graph. So I'm going to plot my points. Remember that you only want points that are right on those intersecting lines. Those are the points that I'm going to want to need. And if you look in your table, you only need 4 points. So I'm just going to use those 4 that I plotted there, and I'm going to start from the top and I'm going to work my way down. And so it's a little bit hard to see on your paper, but each line represents 1. So I'm going to be going over 1, 2. So I know that my x value is 2, and I'm going to be going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So my y value is 9. Then I'm going to be doing the same thing for the other 3 points. And so for this next one, I know I'm going over 1. So I know that my x value is 1, and I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I'm going to do the same thing for that next one. This one's a little bit tricky because to find your x value, I go left or right. But if you notice on this point, I'm not going left or right. So my x value should be 0, and then I'm going up 1, 2, 3 spots. And then I just have one last point here, and I'm going over to -1, which is my x value, and I'm going up nothing, so my y value is going to be 0. So now I need to create an equation given this table and this graph. And so I know that this right here is my rate of change. And what I also know is how to find my rate of change. I have to find my pattern in my table. So I'm looking at my x values, and I'm from 2 to 1, I know that I'm subtracting 1. And I know if I do that all the way over, I'm subtracting 1 each time. But if I look at my y values, it looks like 9 minus 3 will give me 6. So I'm subtracting 3 all the way across. And what I also know is that it's change in my y over my change in my x. So what I know from my table, finding my rate of change, is that this is -3 over -1. And I know that 3 divided by 1 gives me just 3. And then if I wasn't sure if that's going to be a positive or a negative, I draw my triangle. I'm dividing a negative by a negative, so that makes my answer a positive 3. So my rate of change in my equation is going to be 3. Now I have to find my y-intercept. And if you remember from yesterday, to find my y-intercept in my table, I have to first find out where my x is 0. And so I'm looking at my x value, and I'm looking where it says 0. Remember, I want the x value, not the y, because if you notice in your table, you have 2 zeros, but I'm only looking at the x one. So I go over here and I look at the x where it's 0, and then I look directly underneath it, and my y-intercept is 3. So now my equation reads y is equal to 3x plus 3. Now I have to fill in my situation or my word problem. So it says Sarah charges a flat fee of blank for babysitting plus blank per hour. And so this y-intercept is going to be my fee. And then that rate of change is going to be that per hour, because remember that per means to multiply. So in my situation or my word problem, it's going to say Sarah charges a flat fee of $3 for babysitting plus an additional $3 per hour. Now I need my ordered pairs, but if you look in our table, we already have our ordered pairs there, so all I have to do is write them out. So my first ordered pair is 2 and 9. So 2, 9. Then I look over here to my next one, and I have 1 and 6. And then it's only looking for 3 ordered pairs, so my next one would be 0 and 3. So go ahead and pause your video so that you can do the first problem on your practice problems. Alright, so let's go back to example B, and let's figure out what we should do. So it gives us a table rather than a graph, and so we're really good at finding rate of change from our tables. So let's first find what my x values are going by. And I can say that negative 2 plus something will give me 0. So plus 2 gives me 0. Negative 2 plus 2 will give me 0. Then I go from 0 to 2, and that's also adding 2. And then if I were to go to the next one, it'd be adding 2. Remember that it's really only need to look at 2 points. So let's look at my y. Negative 6 plus something will give me negative 3. Well, negative 6 plus 3 will give me negative 3. Then I add another one, so I know that 0 plus 3 will also give me that next number, which is 3. So if I'm looking over here, I've already found my rate of change. Remember, you only really need to look at the top 2. So I have my x, my rate of change is 2, and my y, it's 3. And so I know that it's change in y over my change in my x. And so I know that it's going to be 3 over 2. And so I have 2 ways that I can do this. I can write my rate of change as 3 over 2. Or I could divide that to make that into a decimal. And so remember that it's TIBO. That stands for top in, bottom out. And so the top number, or my 3, goes inside, and the 2 would go outside. And so 2 goes into 3 one time. 2 times 1 is 2. 3 minus 2 is 1. I have a remainder, so I add a decimal and a 0, and I know that 2 goes into 10 5 times. So I could have also done 1.5 there if I wanted to, but leaving it into a fraction or an improper fraction is okay for today. Then I have to look at my table to find my y-intercept, because I know that the last part of my equation is my y-intercept. And so remember, to find your y-intercept from a table, you look where your x value is 0, and you look right next to it, and it's negative 3. So my equation reads y is equal to 3 over 2x plus a negative 3. And put your parentheses there since I have a plus and a negative there. The next thing I have to do is plot my points on my graph, and so that's really easy because we already have the table, and so my table are my ordered pairs. So my first one here is negative 2 and negative 6. So again, it's really difficult to read your graphs, but each line represents 1. So I'm going to go over 1, 2, and I'm going to go down 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then my next one is 0 and negative 3, so I stay at 0 and I go down 3, 1, 2, 3. My next one is 2 and 0, so I go over 2 and stay right there. My next one is 4, so I go over 4 and up 3, 1, 2, 3. My next one is 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I go up 9, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And really, if you can draw a straight line, then I really can stop right there. So we're going to connect those dots and make that straight line. My ordered pairs, again, really simple because our table already gives me the ordered pairs. So I'm going to start at the top. I have negative 2 and negative 6. I have 0 and negative 3. And I have 2 and 0. Sorry, that is a 3. So go ahead and pause your video so that you can do number 2 on your practice problems. Alright, so let's look at example C. And so this one's a little bit different as well. And so it gives you the equation, and you have to figure out the word problem that it corresponds with, and then the table and the graph. And so this one requires just a little bit more work, but it's not too bad. So I have an equation that reads y is equal to negative 1/2 x plus 3. And so I have to put that in a word problem. And so it says, Robert's calling card has a balance of blank. Each call he makes deducts blank from the balance. And so I have to know that this is a one-time thing. And then this right here is going to be one of those per or those each, one of those words, per or each. So let's look at our situation one more time. It says Robert's calling card has a balance of, and so that's a one-time thing. So his calling card is a balance of $3. And then each, you see that word each, tells me that that 1/2 goes there. So each call he makes deducts 1/2 from the balance. And you know that 1/2 is also 0.5, so I could have put 0.5 there as well. And so that would be 50 cents. Now I have to create a table. And so this is where that extra work comes in, but it's really not that bad. So all I have to do is it gives me my x values here. Those are my x values. And so it gives me an equation. And so all I have to do is I have to plug in these x values into my x. So let's start with writing our equation. Y is equal to 1/2 x. I'm sorry, that's a negative 1/2 x plus 3. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this negative 8 and I'm going to plug it into my x. So now my equation should read y is equal to negative 1/2. I'm going to plug in that 8, that negative 8 plus 3. And so I have to solve that. So y is equal to, what is 1/2 of 8? So this reads half of 8. And I know that half of tells me I should multiply. And if I just think about it, if I cut 8 in half, that gives me 4. So I have y is equal to 4 plus 3. And I know that 4 plus 3 gives me 7. So this first value in my y will be 7. Then I have to plug in my 0 for the next one. And so I have y is equal to, the same equation, y is equal to negative 1/2 x plus 3. But now instead of plugging that negative 8, I'm going to plug in 0. So I have y is equal to negative 1/2 times 0 plus 3. So then I put my equation, y is equal to, and it's very important that you list your equation just like this in order so that you stay organized. I know that 1/2 of 0, I can't cut 0 in half, so it's 0. And I know that 0 plus 3 is just 3, so y is equal to 3. So I go over here to my table and I put 3 here because that is what I got when I solved my equation. So I'm going to plug in all of these x values so that I can get my y value. So my next x value is 6, so I'm going to rewrite that equation. Y is equal to negative 1/2 x plus 3. And again, in that x place, I'm going to plug in 6 this time. And so if I look, I know that half of 6 is 3. If I were to cut that 6 in half, it'd be 3 plus 3. But if you notice, I have a negative and I have a positive. And so if I multiply a negative times a positive, that gives me a negative. And so what I also know is that y is equal to negative 3 plus 3, and I know that negative 3 plus 3 gives me 0. So my y value next to my 6 is going to be 0. And I go do the same thing all the way down. So let's look at the next one. I have y is equal to negative 1/2 x plus 3. So I plug in that 10. Y is equal to negative 1/2 times 10 plus 3. I know that half of 10 gives me 5. If I cut that 10 in half, it's 5. But I also know I have a negative and a positive, so that makes that 5 a negative. So negative 5 plus 3. So if I take a negative 5 and I add 3, what I'm really doing, because they have different signs, is I subtract them. So 5 minus 3 gives me 2. And when I subtract them, I keep the sign of the larger number. 5 happens to be my larger number, so I'm going to keep the negative sign. So it's y is equal to negative 2. So I go over to my table and I put negative 2 in the y value. What I want you to do is I want you to go back to your Edmodo page, and you're going to click on the second video to continue your examples.